couple of things. So I've just noticed that I've missed something off my slide, and that is that whilst we also have CPD points for SSI members, we also have FPEC points for Victorian surveyors. And we've mentioned this in our updates yesterday, and we can provide you some more information. But look, welcome. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is George Havakis, and I'm the Managing Director of GISA International. We also have Gabby Van Wyk, our joint venture business partner with Digital Hive, and Kelly Ireland, our communications consultant, who will be moderating this session for us. So thank you to that. Just some logistics for you. We'd like you to continue using the chat dialogue box to ask questions or make a comment. And, you know, so there may be times during the session that you don't have an opportunity to ask a question. So please use the chat box to do that. And then we'll cover off those questions during the wrap-up time. If you've dialed in by phone, that's great. Please do not put us on hold. Otherwise, we may have to disconnect you because it will interfere with the presentation. You can always exit and come back to us. We do request that you keep your camera on. We'd love to see who you are, say hello. It also provides a better environment for the presenters to be able to interact with you. And presenters, we also request that you stay through to the end, as there will be opportunities for more questions there. So a little bit more about today. So today we've created the possibility of collaboration, contribution, and compassion. So what does this really mean? So we've deliberately created a space that's a safe space. So it's about communicating in a responsible manner. Now, as you can see, we have a Digital Hive logo on our screen. What that represents is that we have Menti working. And what we'd like to do is just have you go to our Menti question. If you dial into Menti, menti.com, and enter that code, you get to participate in the first question, because we'd really like to know how you're moving on. And it's about, are you okay? And given the ongoing implications from COVID and its impacts on our everyday lives, it's now more important than ever to connect with those around us. So, are you okay is not just a question for one day. It's a question to really ask every day. Please proceed to Menti and respond to that question. We'd really appreciate it. And I will show the results on the screen. And look, and if you'd like to contact us at any stage, don't hesitate. We're happy to have a chat with you. So thank you for doing that.
Unmuted.
Good morning, whoever that is, or good afternoon, or welcome. I'll also progress it to the next slide, which is just please state your occupation. Will give us a chance to get a sense of where you're from. Now I'm going to hand over to Kelly, and Kelly will take us to our first speaker. So thank you, Kelly.
I think you're muted, Kelly.
Kelly, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to try and bring a different flavour to the A-SPEC forum and events and change it up a little bit. And so I've contributed by making the PowerPoint or the presentations short and sharp. So we also reached out to Lara. George, can you pronounce her surname, please? You're on mute. Anyway, we reached out to Lara, and she is an expert in standards in the US, and unfortunately she mixed up the time zones and she will be a few minutes late. So we're going to push the keynote back to after Andre's presentation. So the presentations, we call them snaps, and they're a series of 6 presentations showcasing real-life A-SPEC stories. And you can see we have our 6 presenters there who will give you a 15-minute presentation about their experience using A-SPEC. The only change to this program is Terence Wood won't be presenting. It's Belinda Baker presenting from Open Spatial. And then the final part of the day, we wanted to try and give you a takeaway, something that you can take back with you and use. So Gabby's going to do some training on QGIS setup, and then George will do a wrap up, and he'll talk about some of the results from the Menti surveys that he's been running throughout the whole forum, and he'll highlight some of the key actions from there as well, and some of the points that have came about. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Andre from One Spatial, and he will start his presentation.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you,
welcome.
George. And thank you, Gabby, for the opportunity. I will just hopefully get my screen up and everyone can see my screen. Yep. Yes, no? Excellent.
Yes.
Don't you love it when technology works? Okay. So are we seeing the full screen or the presentations? There we go, full screen. Okay, so just a little bit about what One Spatial is about. We're a company that's been around for over 50 years. We're an international organisation with offices in Europe and US and in Australia. Head office is in Cambridge, UK. We have offices in Ireland, Belgium, France, Tunisia, United States, and within Australia, we have 2 offices, one in Melbourne and one in Sydney. As you can see, we work in a multitude of different industries, and we partner with a number of different organisations and customers, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to talk to you about the fact that we work collaboratively with our customers, we deliver our solutions, and we work collaboratively with organisations, people striving to manage location and geospatial data, striving to make the world safer, smarter, and more sustainable for our futures, help customers to unlock the value of their data to create a smarter world, and deliver powerful data solutions and applications on-premise, mobile, and in the cloud. The products that we offer, and the ones that I'll be talking about mainly today, is our One Data Gateway, which is the One Spatial management suite of products, which includes a number of different applications. And the one that's of main interest is One Integrate, which I'll talk about a bit more. We are also the Platinum FME partner for Safe Software in Australia. So without further ado, I will introduce our product that we believe is of interest to the A-SPEC community, and that is One Data Gateway. And I'm just going to play a very quick video, and before I get that going, I will There you go. That was the paid advert. And we will.
Can't hear you, Andre.
Can you hear me?
Now,
Hello?
yes.
Yep, I can now. Okay. So we want to. Okay, so One Data Gateway was globally launched on the 4th of March of this year. It is a self-service web portal for spatial data validation, processing, and analytics. One Spatial CTO, Seb Lesware, has said, "We believe One Data Gateway has the power to transform the manipulation of spatial data." Oops. We're also driven by the needs of our customers and in identifying the requirements for an easy-to-use yet powerful portal for data quality and integration. We have developed One Data Gateway for this purpose. So One Data Gateway is available in the cloud, or you can have it on-premise. It has a comprehensive dashboard, offers internal and external users a product that is secure, fully scalable, and customizable. It handles both spatial and non-spatial data files, and is supply chain. Can be used for a supply chain management application as well. It's ideal for transportation infrastructure companies, government agencies, utility companies. It improves the productivity and lowers the costs, guaranteeing control, compliance, and data governance. The self-serve web portal for spatial and aspatial data validation, processing, and analytics. It's a smart, simple, and controlled way to deliver validation rules or data enhancement processes to internal and external users, harnesses the power of rules engines in the cloud. Its project management and security administration is second to none. Automate and data delivery workflows. Data providers can validate data before submitting to save themselves time. And I believe that's where it is very handy for the A-SPEC situation. It ensures that incoming data meets the required level of quality that is set, and it promotes good practice. The user interface that you will see is, as you see on the screen here. This can change, and it does change depending on the level of security that you, or level of access that you provide based on a user's login details or login credentials. So you can have a person that is simply a person that lodges things, right through to a person that administers and manages the whole operation. To give you an idea, for data validation, the original information is provided. It feeds into the data gateway, goes through the business rules, and then a validation report is provided to the user as to what is correct and what needs to be enhanced. Data acceptance. The data can go through, and if it complies, what does comply can automatically go through to the repository and be stored in the area that is where the data needs to be, and a validation report is then passed through to the user at the end. And data enhancements, again, using the business rules, we can take the information and enhance that information to the requirements that are needed for a particular project or needs, using, again, the business rules of the One Integrate product range. So the other benefits that come from it is it allows us to automate the data delivery workflow. Automating it, allowing us to get it in without having to have pre-required steps put into play, etc. Analyze the quality of your incoming data over time. It allows you to manage all the data submissions from a single place, a single point. You can track and audit data submissions and analyze the project's performance. We can feed external business intelligence tools. We can access the rules from anywhere and at any time, thus allowing us to modify, update, change as required. And it provides us an integration into One Integrate, FME, and specific use cases, where the validation and enhancement capabilities to non-expert users, either internally or externally, can be provided. The business needs are many to one supply chains, where we can have quality and content of data submissions. It gives rise to resubmissions being easily done. It's highly prevalent in a federated data model. It's highly prevalent in the contractor supply chain, and it reduces time and costs of the data supply chain. To give you a couple of case studies, one of them is in the United States, they're utilising the One Integrate or One Data Gateway, where the Federal Highways Organisation doesn't actually do any data capture themselves. They actually rely on the 52 different Department of Transports. So each state in the US has their own Department of Transport that is responsible for collecting the data. They then are required by legislation to submit the data to Federal Highways that then have it as the national network. So that's very much a federated model. In the past, what they had was CDs would be sent in by a required day. Those CDs would then have to be manually gone through, validated, and naturally enough, they wouldn't work, so they'd go back, and they'd go backwards, forwards, forwards, backwards, and therefore your data was never really current and up to date. The other area that it was used for was for the census, the Bureau of Census in the United States. Again, they don't actually do much data collecting themselves. They rely on the 3,200 different counties that have the information and have the requirement to collect the information to provide them the information. Naturally, the counties collect more information than is required by census. So utilising the One Data Gateway, they were able to obtain or have the information provided to them, and using the business rules, fleece out the information that wasn't needed, validate what was submitted to make sure that it complied with their requirements before going into their census information system. So what are some of the customers? Not only is the process quicker and less costly, it's also more efficient. The locals can send in data at any time, which means the data set is no longer accurate only once a year. The information is accurate as it is being submitted and complying with the business rules.
Thanks, Andre. Does anyone have any questions for Andre before we go on to the next presentation? If you don't have any questions right now, you can always also put them in the chat, and we will address those questions at the end of the presentation with George in George's session. So I think that was a pretty informative presentation, so thank you. I'd like to talk quickly about our next speaker, Lara, who's our keynote speaker, but was running a bit late because she's from the US, and we got some time zone mixed up. So Lara, are you still here? Yes, she is. So I'm going to hand you over to Lara right now, so in the interest of staying on time, and Lara will present to you on governing your data for optimum ROI and introduce herself just very quickly. Thank you. So Lara, you're on mute, I think. And your camera's off.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yay.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you, Lara.
Yes. Good morning, and good day to you, and good afternoon to me here in California. I'm so excited to be with you this morning over there. I am so excited to be part of this conversation we're having today, and it's such a delight that we're having this conversation at such a time like this. And for some of you that already know me anyway, that we've kicked off conversation around data with, you know that this is my sweet spot. This is my happy place. Let's put it that way. In a kind of a weird way, you know how passionate I am around data and then the governance around it. So today we don't have a lot of time. I wish we have more than 15 minutes to have this conversation. Well, I want to open up our conversation today really around the governance of your data, governing your data for optimal ROI. And when I was thinking about this topic today, I thought, you know, the best way for us to actually get this conversation really going, what will really be apt at such a time like this is for us to look at what's going on in our ecosystems, seriously, what's going on. And so I put some thoughts together around this, and I said, let's open up the conversation around what's going on year 2020. Yes, it's been a year, right? I know in California, we've been in this lockdown since, it seems forever, since March, and we know this is where we're gonna be really through the end of the year. So it's our own, you know, it's our definition of normal, really. So year 2020, it's come with a lot of big surprises for every one of us. And we are still, you know, when we still have like 3 months packed in it. So again, we're hoping the next 3 months will be a little bit lighter on us. But looking at year 2020, I think we ought to really kind of reflect on this year in terms of data, in terms of this topic we're talking about. And I like the fact that this year, there are a lot of silver lining, even in this pandemic that we're going through, the season we're going through. The fact that every one of us now know a little bit something about data, from, you know, a toddler to, you know, 90-year-old, 100-year-old, you know, whoever is living. I think we've all added 1 or 2 things to our vocabularies this year about data, about, you know, the fact that data is leading us, the fact that, you know, we're checking on the trends from testing to contact tracing, to the research in the labs, to the global economy, you know, what we can do to kind of rev it up. All of these things are really putting data in the limelight like never before for everyone, especially for most people that haven't really engaged data in the way or have conversation around data the way we're having it now. So it's really enriched, you know, our vocabulary to that extent, and you know, which is really, in a way, I see that as a, you know, as a real silver lining around this. So yeah. So, but the thing is, I think in all of this conversation, one of the things that I know for those of us that are data practitioners is not really strange to us is the fact that the data we're talking about, it's not just any kind of data. when we're talking about data for even the pandemic, be it for the economy, be it for anything, the muted part of the conversation is what kind of data are we really talking about? We're talking about trusted data, really. Because again, for the insight that we need for what's going on right now, for the predictions that we need for what's going on right now, for the forecast that we need to project, we need quality, trusted, business-ready data. And if any one of us can even imagine at such a time like this, if we can imagine all this data where we're relying on so heavily, if these data are in such a state as we have in most of our organizations, poor quality data, I think, you know, it will be kind of an uphill battle for us if our data is not in a ready state, in an insightful way. So data on its own really, it's a lot of noise without insight in it. And so what I'm going to talk about today is really this data that we're talking about, the kind of data we're talking about, not just any kind of data. Of course, data has always been around for a very long time. And we've been producing data. We've been doing a lot of things with data for a very long time. But what, sorry, I need to, backtrack a little bit. The kind of data I wanted to kind of, open up the conversation now around how data landscape, what's been happening before this pandemic. What's been happening before this pandemic in the data space is that in the last decade, I would say the last 11, 12 years, at least for those of us here in the US, and I know it's the same with Australia, because I've been engaged in Australia with training and some consulting, and this actually during this pandemic, which is really the sweet spot of it. And Europe, what's been going on in this data landscape is the fact that, we've seen data played roles that we never could have envisaged in a long time. We've seen data really stretched to do all of we've had this growing appetite around our data, the volume of data that we produce every day. We're producing tons of data like never before. That's why we're saying we're in a digital age. And actually, every one of us, we've all coined a lot of phrases around the fact that data is driving us, the fact that data is the new oil, data is an asset. We're all saying that. We were seeing that appetite grown around innovation, around analytics, around all of this, and coupled with the fact that now we have accountability around the regulatory space. So the regulatory space is briefed up like never before. We're getting regulations thrown at us from different sides of the hand, from different sides of the hour. We're getting, a lot of things, really going on. But again, we were saying that we are in a data-driven economy. Data is the new oil, and all of these things we've been singing the mantra around them. Well, on the surface, it looks like we got everything all covered. Like we truly understand really the value in data, the essence of data. But what we've seen with this current pandemic that is going on is the fact that really the pandemic really underscores some of the things that we haven't really been paying too much attention to. Even those of us that have been in the data space that have been kind of trying to make some noise around the fact that our data have to be at the optimal state. Our data have to be consumable. Our data have to be trusted. So now, when you look at what's going on in this space, the regulatory demands, the business demands, and everything that we want to do with data, all of these things are pointed to the fact that we need trusted data. We need data that gives us insight. We need to make better decisions with our data. So those are the things that have been happening before this pandemic, and it's only revving up really to the next level at this point in time. So let's, so what have we been doing? Knowing the fact that we've seen data play important role in our day-to-day life, in every sector, in the financial space, in insurance, in healthcare, for predictive analytics, for forecast, for everything, in manufacturing, in retail. We've seen the data at play in all of these sectors. But what have we been doing? If those of us in in the data space that have known about the importance of data, the essence of data. What have we been doing with those over the time? The unfortunate thing is we've been scratching the surface. We've been doing a lot of things towards the appetite. We've been doing a lot of things to fulfill our regulatory demands. And a lot of regulatory demands are thrown at us, around GDPR. We have, anti-money laundering. We have a lot of that. We have a lot of regulations that are localized to us. We have GDPR, which is, European, and some of us, even in the US, we have to comply with that. And then we have the California. For those of us in California, we call it CCPA, which we call a cousin of GDPR. It is very similar, not exactly the same thing. So we have all of these things just coming at us at different, angles. And what we've been doing is, so when we look at all of this, we have a lot of challenges that we've been kind of sweeping under the rug in our attempt to get compliance, in our attempt to fulfill those appetite around innovations, to do all of these things we've been doing. We have a lot of computing demands. We have data that's all over the place. That we have a lot of noise around our data. That's it. The quality of our data is really not at the optimum. But we've been forging ahead, and I say this, with a lot of full conviction around this, because again, I've been in different sectors, offering consulting help, and again, it's the same everywhere I've been, in the sense that the quality of the data have been at the back burner for most organizations. And it's only in recent years now that we are really beginning to see and pause and to reflect on what we can do with this data, the data that we have in our ecosystem, to truly start treating it as an asset, to really start being driven with insight, so that we're not just singing the mantra of data driven. If the data is not good, then we're blinded around it. So this slide is just to, give some, and again, I know this is kind of like old data, but again, this is still what's going on in our ecosystem. The money we're leaving on the table when we're not concerned, or when we're not taking as much care as we should have been on the health of our data. It's hurting us huge. The loss of sales, the wasted time and all of this, you can see some of those numbers there. And so this is where really data governance come into the picture. Data governance, there are so many things we're doing over the years around the quality of our data. And a lot of things we're doing around our data is very reactive in a way. And I say this, a lot of organizations really have been playing really what I call the whackable game with their data, because you see a lot of money we've been spending on data just to fix fix and cure and make data business ready. And the time, what we see right now is that the time, we don't even have time to do all of those, but we're spending money, we're allotting money to data quality issues. Year by year, we're spending millions on the quality of our data, and it's really not serving us to really be spending those money. And one of the things that really is even coming to play at this point in time is the fact that our consumers don't really have that time to wait for our data to be ready for them to consume. So data governance really is positioned as the only discipline really that really wants, is really positioned to deal really with the root cause of all of our data problems, instead of being reactive. Because all other things that we're just dealing with the symptoms, but again, the fundamental issues that we have with our data, which have been compounding issues over the years that we've inherited, are things that are really very deep, that in order for us to really start addressing the health of our data, it takes a cultural transformation. Stewardship, it takes harmonizing our processes with our people and our technology. So data governance really focuses really on that, the people. The people is at the heart of this, and stewardship is really what drives governance. And so I want to share just a little bit with you on how data governance really does that, and how we can really start harnessing the value add of our adoption, because again, the value add of the adoption is really where we're gonna get all of those things we're trying to, really solve for if we really position governance as the bedrock of all of our data initiatives. And if we look at it really from two lenses, at least, if we look at it from the regulatory lens or the market expectations around our data, we can see that our regulators and what we are trying to do in all of our industries are very similar in nature. Everyone is asking for that transparency. We all want to be able to trust the data we're consuming. We want to know the journey of the data. We want to make sure that the data is, there's a full accountability around our data. We want to know that quality issues are being addressed, that we're monitoring issues as they come in, and that we're resolving them. That transparency is really at the heart of what most of our regulators are asking us around. They want to make sure that the data we collect from our consumers, that we're taking due diligence around them. That, we're really adhering to that. And those are the things that really we should be doing naturally, because again, that just makes a lot of sense. And the same thing when we think about the decision support and all the internal things that we want to do, even our appetite around innovation, we want to do all of those as well, because once our data can be trusted, even with all the analytics that we are doing, if the data is not trusted, then our models will be questionable. Even with AI, with ML, we'll come up with outputs at the end of all the simulations that really is still going to be questionable. So really, this is really what data governance really is positioned to do, using the standards of care of data governance to really harness the full potential in our data. That really is at the heart of this, and that's really where we can start beginning to really optimize the value in our data. Another quick thing I want to touch about that has been going on in recent years is like we've all been moving to the cloud. We've been moving to the cloud to do a lot of things, and really what's pushed us to the cloud is a number of things. We know the fact that we really migrated away from the traditional warehousing of data and ETL and all of those that takes months and even years in some organizations to achieve. So now, our consumers are asking for that singular source of truth. They're asking for speed and agility of delivery. All of these things we're doing a job with that. So how we can really optimize this is really to start governing the data in the cloud, so that all those data that we're putting that central lake in place, so that our data is ready for consumers to consume. We want to make sure that we're governing the inflow of the data into our lakes. We're governing the outflow of those data, so that those lakes don't become a swamp for us at the end of the day. But again, this I see it's a really sweet marriage between the lake and governance, really, because if we can put start governing our data in the lake from that central repository, from that central place, and just put all of our standards of care there, and we start certifying the data that comes out of the lake as that single authoritative source for us to consume our data. All of the other data initiatives that are coming from different lens, be it regulatory demands, be it market demands, be it analytics or ML, be it anything we want to do, we're consuming from the same singular source, and we know governance is on it. This is where our data maturity is going to start revving up. And again, this is really where we can truly start actualizing what we mean by being data driven, what we mean by treating our data as an asset. Because again, we start doing the things that we should have been doing over the years, and it's going to be a win-win for us overall, because at the end of the day, the only constant in our data landscape is going to be change. And I know for some of us, over the years, and I recall I was in financial industry 2008, 2009, when we had the financial fiasco and we saw all the regulations come to play, and everybody thought, oh, well, the regulations were coming in because of the financial collapse and it was going to go away. Well, guess what? It's been 11 years since that saga. We're still in it. It's the new definition of normal, and it's here to stay. All of the regulatory space is here to stay. Our appetite for innovation is gonna only rev up. So change is the only constant that we have in our data world. So we would need to position ourselves to start really practicing, proactive governance around that data, because we don't know what the next wave is gonna be, what the next thing is gonna be. So we need to position our data as that oasis of assets where we can anything, irrespective of what that demand is coming, internal, external. If we position our data really as a singular investment for optimal ROI, and we position it in that central repository, then it starts yielding those, multiple, ROI for us. And that's really the sweet spot where every organization right now, especially at such a time like this, where the global economy is prosperous and everything is working to our advantage, really. So for a lot of organizations that have been sitting on the fence for a very long time, here is an opportunity for you to get your, get the house together. And for some that have been struggling with their adoption over the years, you have an opportunity now to push the reset button. As the economy is opening up for us, you can, you have an opportunity to recalibrate yourself, because really the global economy is not sleeping right now, it's really recalibrating itself. And the winners are gonna be those who really are positioning their data to keep winning for them. And again, the takeaway from this is the fact that, again, all these things, if you really ingrain data governance as the bedrock of all of your data initiatives and start, harnessing the full potential in it, I think, we will be at a better place around our data. And again, it can only get better. And our maturity over time will start, working for us. This is really where you start seeing that our data will start working for us.
Thanks, Lara. Oh, good timing. I was just coming in to. Unfortunately, we are tuned into our Q&A time for Lara, but if you have some questions, can you please put them in the chat or keep them for the end of the session when we have George's session. So our next speaker was going to be Ken Tolman, but Ken hasn't logged on just yet, so we're going to swing straight to Brett Watkins.
He is on.
Oh, Ken is on? Great, I couldn't see him before. Ken, welcome. We're going to make you the presenter, and Lara and all the other speakers, if you could all please stay online till the end of the session, into the end of the George's sessions, that would be really great. Yep. So thank you all again, and I'll hand you over to Ken Tolman, who's GeoComp Consulting.
Yeah, and look, just before you start, Ken, Lara, thank you very much for that presentation. It was music to my ears, and I look forward to asking you a few questions in the wrap-up. Over to you, Ken.
Yeah. Sorry, just one more thing, Ken and other speakers, if you can keep to your time so we can allow for questions. I'm sure people have lots of questions from your presentation, so but, I won't cut you off until your Q&A's time is eaten into as well, so just be mindful of that. Thanks, guys. Over to you, Ken. Ken, are you on mute?
Yes, he is. You're presenting to yourself, Ken. That's okay.
All right, seems like Ken has some difficulties with his tech. So maybe we will go across to Brett and come back to Ken.
You may be able to unmute.
Brett Watkins.
Kelly, potentially you might be able to unmute.
Yes.
Yeah. Presenter.
Ken, can you speak? No, we can't hear you. Brett, are you ready to take over? Brett Watkins from ListTech and Neil Brown from ListTech have got an interesting presentation for you as well. So we'll start off with those guys, and we'll come back to you, Ken, once you sort out your mute.
Yeah, sure.
Over to you, Brett.
Perfect.
So-
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate that.
So-
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Brett, will I make Neil the presenter or you the presenter?
You can make me the presenter to start with, and then I might just hand over to Neil in a couple of minutes' time to,
Yep,
to
sure.
run through the
Just
demo.
let me know when.
Yep, perfect. Will do. Yeah, okay. So thanks again, everyone, for the opportunity here. That's been, yeah, it's great. It's about as exciting as things get at the moment. So, yeah, certainly happy to be part of it all. Yeah, I hope everyone's going well. I know George touched on it earlier, but so yeah, hopefully everything is going well for people. It's not the easiest at the moment. So I think many of you will be aware of our flagship product, LizCAD, but maybe not as aware of our next generation product, Neo. I know there are a few people online that do use Neo here, which is great. You may be slightly ahead of the curve. That's really good. So basically today we're just going to run through a live A-SPEC workflow demonstration on Neo. My colleague Neil Brown, as Kelly mentioned, he'll run through that. He'll speak a little bit more to the demo, but it's really not meant to show, I suppose, best practice, just to highlight what is capable and the ease of moving through Neo. We do have some data from both LizCAD as well as 12D. That can be created in Neo, just to make people aware, but we thought it might be best to spread the love across a couple of other platforms. We know there's a large variety of products used in the spatial industry, so just to show that flexibility, I suppose. I might just share what I have here now. Everyone see that there? What we've got up there? Hopefully.
Yep,
It is
all good,
appearing on
Brett.
my screen, so it should be okay. Yep.
Looks good.
Perfect. Yeah, so just to go through a little bit about Neo as well, if people aren't aware, just to touch on this demonstration of Neo is not going to delve much into what Neo is capable of, more just focus on that A-SPEC specific stuff. So just a little bit about Neo that we can see there. There's key features, probably most relevant down here with the template, but the extensive views of definable attributes, as well as there's many other key features which we're happy to go through and show in more detail maybe at a later stage. We'll keep moving through. Some of the A-SPEC specific features, automated creation and updating of various attributes such as coordinates, inverts, length, the auto addressing, which is key, to get the street names, lot numbers and details from subdivisions. Scripting as well, which means you can easily automate the repetitive tasks. Export code lists with required attributes to different instruments. Collect the field data and bring it back in. There's the built-in QA, which you'd hope and expect, which is really good as well, and everything's shown in the export report. The inbuilt templates with pre-configured layers and attributes, so there's no need to set any of that up either. So there's just a few of the key features, I suppose, as well as many others. Once you get using, you'll certainly see. Just to run through quickly what Neil will be about with his demo. So we'll create the new project based on the A-SPEC template that I mentioned that you can have pre-set up. Import your drainage design, which has some details there. Then import the subdivision plan as well. Then go through and import the property connections and export to D-SPEC, which will show all the details that you need. So that's basically how Neil's going to run with what we've got there. And then just to show some of the formats that Neo generally does support as well, like showing there, I think there's around 50 export options for Neo. So you're really covered with everything. Some of the A-SPEC specific stuff is obviously not catered for all of us, but really it's data exchange tool as well. It can cross over whatever boundaries you need to essentially. So I might just get George, you to transfer across to Neil. And I think if George is there, you can transfer the presenter to Neil, which I think is the case now.
Okay.
And I'll get Neil to take over.
All right. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, George. Good morning, everyone. So my name's Neil Brown, and I lead the development team at ListTech. In this demo, I'm going to tear through preparing a D-SPEC submission using our ListTech Neo spatial software, using data from a variety of sources. In the interest of time, I'm going to take some liberties and just look at pits, pipes, and property connections, but it'll give you a flavor of what you can do with Neo. I'm going to start by creating a new project based on a A-SPEC template here.
Yeah. I couldn't hear you sound. The mic wasn't.
I'm sorry.
We can hear you loud and clear now, Ken.
Well, I'll go direct through the mic on the laptop, I think, this time.
Sorry,
Yeah,
can
yeah.
you mute yourself?
If nothing happens in a short time, we'll just switch on to the next one.
Guys, we're interrupting Neo.
That's okay. I've just muted Ken.
Okay, thank you.
Go for it now.
Okay, so you can see here there's a range of layers that are built in to Neo. These have the sorry, I'm just trying to see it myself. So we have a series of layers that are built in here to Neo in this template, and if we have a look at one of these layers, we can see that it's got all the appropriate attributes defined. And if we have a look at one of these attributes, we can see that it's configured with the list of supported values. Now, the first data set that I'm going to import is the drainage design from 12D. But before I do that, I'm going to set up a lookup table because the drainage design contains a lot of information that we don't need for A-SPEC. So there's a lot of different things in the drainage design that we will just pollute the file. And so in order to keep things nice and neat, we're going to convert these to nothing. So when we import the data, we won't have these things that we're not interested in. So we'll import the drainage design, and just in the options, I'm going to set here the lookup table. So now you see we've got a series of lines and points. So if we come in a bit closer and have a look at one of these, we can see that we have a few attributes set already, some invert levels and a diameter of width. And there's also a pipe type, which isn't an A-SPEC attribute, it's come from 12D, but we can use this to generate some additional attributes, which I'll show you in a minute. Now, similarly for the pit, for the point, you'll see it's on the pits layer, and it has a couple of attributes already, plus this pit type, which is also coming from 12D and which doesn't correspond to A-SPEC. Now, where there's a junction of more than one pipe, we've got some multiple pits here, so I'm just going to filter them out to begin with. Just select these and filter. Now, obviously, in your survey, you'd have to verify the size of these and orientation of these, but we'll skip that for this demo. Now, what I want to show you is a query. I've pre-prepared one here, but this query will go through and convert the attributes from 12D to D-SPEC. So it will look at all the pipes, check the pipe type, and then set appropriate attributes for A-SPEC. Similarly, for the pits, it will go through and check each of the pit types and set appropriate attributes for A-SPEC. And actually, some of the pits, as they're called in 12D, are actually end walls. So some of those pits will be then moved to the correct layer, and again, appropriate attributes set for them. We can do this for the entire job just by running the query. And if we have a look at the messages, we can see that some attributes have been created. And now if I go and have a look at this line again, we can see we've got some additional attributes. So it's got the proper A-SPEC type, material, and pipe shape and so on. And similarly for the pits. Now the next data set I'm going to import is a subdivision design. In this case it was done in ListCAD, but it could have been done in Neo itself or GeoCivil or some other package. So we'll see here now we've got some polygons, and if I have a look at some of these, so this one with a code of 212 represents a road polygon. We can see that the description is the name of the street. And here we have with a code of 112 is a lot polygon, and the description is the lot number. These will come in handy in a minute when we go to do the export out to A-SPEC. But there's one final data set I want to import, and that's a survey where we've picked up some property connections. So I'll just import that. Now I'll zoom in here so you can see there's a few additional points that have come in. I'll just turn on the names here where you can see them. So we've got a property connection. Now the surveyor could only pick up the end point. He couldn't see where the pipe, where it joins the pipe underground. So we're going to create those lines which are required for A-SPEC here. We'll just set the active layer as the property connection layer, and then we'll go here to create and create line by line offset. So we'll create a line from the property connection to the pipe, and we'll just do this for a few of them. And now I'll just switch to 3D view for a second. So we can see now we've got these lines created for the property connections which go down to the pipe. At this point, we're ready to have the first crack at exporting out to A-SPEC. So we go export A-SPEC. We go into our options here. There are a few options that are relevant. There's an extended report. At this point, we're probably expecting quite a few validation failures because we haven't gone through and checked every single attribute. So we'll just leave it on the summary. Now, through the cadastral design, what we can do is get some of the attributes from the subdivision. So for the property connections, for example, the street name and the lot number can be populated automatically. So I'll just select these layers and attributes that we showed before. And now we'll just choose the output folder and do the export. Now we'll get a report telling us how the export out to A-SPEC has gone and if there's any validation problems. So the first one, I didn't set the coordinate system, so I'll just go back in and fix that. This one is GDA 2020 zone 55. Now we can see here that it's gone through and created itself a various attributes. Many of these can be computed from the geometry itself, so the easting and northing, the finished surface layer level. Street name it's been able to get from the subdivision design, for example. If I go back here to the model view and have a look at this pipe again, we can see it's now got a lot more attributes. So these have been populated either, as I said, computed, coming from other data within the file, or using default values if there's one available. Now, obviously, you don't have to accept the defaults. You can go back through and correct these as you need to. We also see that there's a few attributes here missing for one of the pits, so something was missed in our script. There must be something that's not handled by our script. We can see that all the pits are missing the fenced attribute. So let's go through and fix that now. We can go to layers, narrow this down to where we actually have data. We'll select all these pits. So we've got them all selected now. And we can just go and create this fenced attribute. In this case, the not fenced. A similar thing has happened for the other layers, the head and end walls, the pipes, property connections. A lot of these can be populated automatically. But there's a few here that we didn't add for the property connections. So we can do that quickly now. We'll just select these property connections. So those 4 that I created before. and we'll create those 3 missing attributes. So we can set the material, the diameter or width, and the silk trap. And okay, so we've still got one point which we're not sure which one it is that's missing some attributes. Let's go through and do another export. And we'll just overwrite the last files. Okay, I forgot to set the extended report, so just let me do that again. Now that we've got it narrowed down, we want to find out a bit more detail. Okay, so we can see there's now just 3 attributes that are missing, and this is for a particular point. We can just go and find that point here and create those few missing attributes as we need to, whatever they are. And now we've should have satisfied all the validation issues. So if we do the export one last time, we'll see it goes through and exports and no report comes up because there's no issues with the file. So there's a very quick creation of a submission for A-SPEC using Neo. Thank you very much.
Work, Neil. Well done. Hopefully that was relatively clear to everyone. He's flown through that, which is really good, but it just shows you how quickly you can get things done. It's nice and smooth. So we'll hand it back over to you, Kelly and George.
Thanks very much, Brett and Neil. So one of the questions that I have is, are you finding that consultants want to bring their data into your product? Like what? So you spoke about 12D and you spoke about your ListCAD environment. What about if somebody just wants to bring in some ASCII data? How can you handle that?
So we also we support a lot of different imports, and one of them is a user defined. So I don't have a file here, but it allows you to configure, take an ASCII file in whatever configuration it might be, and then configure that in Neo so it knows how to interpret the file, and then you can get the data in that way. It also supports code processing and control code processing in the next one, so that that text file can automatically create lines and polygons as well as point data and attribute data. So yes, we're very flexible in how you get this your data into Neo.
Great, thank you.
I should also say that we can take this template that we've got for A-SPEC and export out to your data. Perhaps you've got some design data like I've shown here. You can export that out to your field controller with all the appropriate attributes. And by appropriate attributes, I mean only ones that you're interested in the field, ones that you would want to validate in the field, or ones that you want to collect in the field, and not ones that you know from the office or you can compute in the office. So you can put that out to your field controller, just pick up the data that you want and then bring it back into Neo, so to complete or to validate your A-SPEC.
Thanks again, Neil.
Great. Thanks for that, Neil and Brett. I'm going to move on now to Ken, who has, I believe you heard, fixed his tech difficulties. So Ken from Geocomp Consulting will make you the presenter now. Over to you.
Yeah, so can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Ah, good. I'll put a little bit of apology in for the earlier thing, and the sound check I did with Kelly when she rang me. It served two purposes. She made contact, and you could hear it at your end, so we knew we had that sorted. So I'll just switch the screen over, get rid of. So is that, you're seeing something at your end?
Your beautiful beard there, Ken.
Oh, we must be able to do better than that. If I click on the screen here, does that mean you'll see mine?
Screen share.
Yeah, share, yep. Entire screen. So you're still only seeing me, eh?
Yes.
Well, maybe I'll do a bit of talking. It's okay that from what we've just seen there with Neil, he covers a lot of the things that we do with our software, probably in a more elegant way. So I'll take the opportunity just to cover a few other things. So is the verbal okay? If you can hear me, you pick it up all satisfactorily?
Yes, all good.
Now, yeah, we've been in this for a long time. That back in early 2000s, George contacted me when A-SPEC had first been developed, and they had the next issue was how do you process data, and they had a client who had one to put through, Miller and Merrigan, and we started with that. Now, going a little bit back before that, digital data really started to come into existence through the 80s, and in the late 70s, the Surveyor General had a subcommittee for a standard which became AS2482, and that was mainly aimed at small-scale mapping. And at that time, we started to look, when talking to people from the various service authorities in Melbourne Water, was that we needed a standard for larger scale. And there was no real impetus in those days, and it really wasn't until A-SPEC came along that became a prominent thing. So through the 80s, we started to see a bit of digital data. Melbourne Water got into geocoding of their properties, and we did a lot of that for them. And then led up to the late 80s, they were digitising existing map base, which for them was either 1 in 500 or the old 40 foot to the inch. And George may well have been with Melbourne Water through that period. So digital data then became reality, but most users were only interested in the graphical output. They still had paper maps. So we lead into the 2000s, and 2001 was the initial study that was done for the spatial upgrader VicMap. Now, we became very interested in that because through the late 90s, Melbourne Water did their Greater Melbourne flood study. So that was all the municipalities that they covered, which was 26. And we'd done a pilot together with one of the engineering consultants and come up with a spatial approach to doing that. So we built up the data model and worked in conjunction with the engineers. So we were now dealing with digital map base, and in Greater Melbourne, we could see that it served the purpose reasonably well for a flood study, because a metre or two in position didn't greatly affect, when we're working out which properties were affected. But at that same time, maybe a little later in the 90s, Melbourne Water also put out a news release that I think it was something like 68,000 properties across Melbourne didn't have reticulated sewer. And so they're going to embark on a program to rectify that. Now, similar things were happening around country areas as well. So we developed a solution in conjunction with our engineering colleagues where we had a spatial approach to sewer design, which was property-based, and it would automatically compute block controls and this sort of thing. Now, through that, we started to realise that VicMap was reasonably suitable. There were some areas where, in Melbourne, where the differences affected where property connection would be, but in country areas, it was a very big problem that they do a functional design using VicMap, and in some places that might be out by 5 metres. So they later find out that where they'd proposed to put the sewer manholes and the pipes wasn't in the relationship they had expected. So that brought to the fore that something needed to be done. And Peter Ram was in charge of some things in there then, and we did an initial study on that. So we got through that, and then we see the evolution then of A-SPEC, and we both included in our software for various ones to use, and increasingly we found out there are a lot of consultants who only periodically needed to do an A-SPEC, and they would send data to us, and that came in a variety of forms. Now, the most common is that they would have produced an AutoCAD drawing of the project, and they would annotate the pipes and the pits, and that was a product in itself which their client required, and then they would send that to us to produce the D-SPEC output. And then when A-SPEC came along, we're starting to deal with similar things but more data. Now, we've been fortunate in Victoria that since, well, I suppose the late 80s, the Vic Roads feature coding has been fairly widely used. Like we provided software to Vic Roads in those days. They introduced us to their feature coding, and that's widely used. You'll find that most surveyors in Victoria probably use those still, the same codes. Now, the introduction of A-SPEC, I mean, we need to augment that. Vic Roads had some general codes for pipes and pits and things, but A-SPEC requires a wider range and the assignment of attributes to them. So we've had some companies that will build an Excel spreadsheet of an A-SPEC job and send that in conjunction with a drawing, and the two are linked purely by the unique identifiers in the drawings. So we're at a stage now where there's quite a number of companies who send data in various formats to us, and we'll standardize it, and we work it into standard layers and the attributes, and we end up with something similar to what Neil just shown, but not quite as sophisticated. One of the things I did like about what Neil was showing was the ability to see that in a 3D context. Many years ago, we sort of got into that part way where we would allow you to look at an elevation view, and you can see the value from what Neil showed is that if you have things like property connections and that, you want to be able to see the sort of grade of it. You want to be able to see that your pipe network is, you've got falls through pits and this sort of thing. And I can see that that would work very well with the way they built that model. So we come through to a period now where it's getting the commonality between the as-built and the design. And one of the things that I found a little frustrating in working with A-SPEC is that the design drawing may not use the same coding as in A-SPEC. And sometimes it's difficult to find a complex design of, let's say, a 50 lot, and you've got all the roads and all the services, you've got many, many sheets, and you can spend a bit of time reading through the notes and all sorts of things just to try and find out what the default pipe type was and things like that. So one thing that the A-SPEC community could look to is trying to bring together better the design elements to the as-built. And I think to some degree that's what Neil was showing, that they can take a 12D design and then build that through with as-built data into the final thing for the as-built database. One other issue that's just come up in recent times, that you'll probably be aware that there's a project underway now for the digital cadastral modernisation, and the aim there to get the cadastre to better than 0.1 in metropolitan or urban areas, and to possibly 0.5 in rural. Now that'll obviously provide a good base for all this attribute data. In one of the problems at the moment is, particularly in rural areas, is that municipal councils and things have got the dilemma of trying to match real world asset to cadastre, which can sometimes be spatially out by quite a bit. There was a seminar last Friday where they were going through the progress of that, but one thing that came through was that at the moment easements aren't being included in the spatial upgraded VIC map, and I think that's something that the A-SPEC community might look at, because obviously your pipe attributes quite often need to be known relative to an easement, and you'd at least like to know that it falls within the easement and the easement is on the same site. I think that fairly well covers what I want, and if you reflect a little bit back on what Neil showed, you get a feel for the process that we work through. So if we've got through that in a reasonably short time, I'd be happy to answer a question or two.
Thanks.
Back to your end.
Yes, thanks, Ken. And yes, I was involved in that Melbourne Water initial project to digitise the state, the metropolitan area, and yes, that's what I cut my teeth on. So that was probably, I didn't know it then, but that was the genesis of what is now A-SPEC.
Yes.
So I've got a question for you, and it's probably a little bit of detail, but be interested to know about the kind of differences that, one example of a difference between the design drawing and the as-built. Like, what's one major difference that you see?
I think, one thing I've sort of found is even, say, the pavement makeup, that generally there's a typical section shown on the design drawing, but the description of the materials won't exactly match what's in the code lists. And I think the problem there is that might be jurisdictional, that different states or even New Zealand might refer to the same material by a different name. And I'm sort of coming at it from the point of view that mainly the surveyor who's sort of got to collect the data, and he's sort of got to try and then sort out information which the engineer might have a good handle on. And if it's in a big organisation where multidisciplinary, the answer will lie within the organisation. But if it's just a consultant who's been asked to do the pickup and produce the A-SPEC, he may not have that information available to him. And on that sort of a separate question of that, then, George, what I should mention is that one thing I find a little bit frustrating is that there's a very short time frame up front on the as-built. Like, you're trying to get it done within maybe a couple of weeks, and that can be problematic. You've got weather and different things in there, and the design, the construction is often not quite completed when the surveyor has to go out there. But I've encountered on a number of occasions a council might come back more than 12 months later, and they'll ask whether or they'll mention that a property connection's missing or something. And I would like to think that time frame should be much shorter, that if the contractor has to submit an A-SPEC within 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something, that it'd be good if the council could have done its testing and integrating with their data and have basically responded within a month or something, because to have to chase back on something that's a year old, a property connection or something, it's not likely you're going to find it when you get out there.
Yeah, look, I understand, and I'd be completely frustrated with that. You would be pleased to know that in the specs we state probably up to 15 days, or by agreement. So I'd be following up to see what they want to commit to in terms of responding to that.
Yeah, if it's stated, then I suppose it is something you can negotiate with the council. You can basically say, well, look, it's a bit late, to be asking. Yeah.
Yes, we're encountering the same thing. We've got some clients in WA that are asking us to validate data, which they only validate once a year. And I said, well, how can we expect the industry to actually spend the time to go back and remember what went on. It's just not a workable solution. But look, I get it. It's a really valid point that you raised, Ken, and it's something that is about us creating further awareness and education around the impact of that. So thanks for raising it.
Sounds good. Might be time for the next speaker.
Okay. All right. So on...
George,
yes.
There was a comment by Joanna. At Melton, we try to retrieve in the suggested time frame, but with over 6,000 lots per year, some slippage happens.
I think you're just making excuses now, Joanna. But I get it. And yes, and so there's going to be a lot of work going on, but we can have a talk about what your automated processes are like, and just see how you can leverage off your AC/DC implementation there. But I get it. There's a lot of stuff to do. On that note, Kelly, back to you.
Yep. Thanks, George. We're moving on. So Janos Herbely from GV Consulting is going to have a chat with you about a visualization project that he did. So I'm going to hand you over to Janos, and George is going to flick the switch. Thanks.
All done.
Good. Are we up? Okay, so my name is Janos Herbely. I'm an industrial designer, also an industrial animator. So I take data and I basically create the visualizations that you're going to see. My whole purpose is accurately displaying what the plans show. So we've been working in architecture at the beginning. We are well versed in mining, oil and gas, and engineering. So the accuracy is the key for us. Now, I've known George for almost 20 years now. And about 6 or 7 years ago, we came across an opportunity to have the government fund a little project to showcase A-SPEC data as far as what the reality of that A-SPEC data could be. So actually showing to people that can't necessarily understand plans as well as they should. Now I'm trying to get us over to the actual video. Have you clicked me on for presenter?
Yes, you are it.
Okay, can anybody see what I'm, here we go. Can't see it. Let me see, I'm trying to get my Firefox working. Let me just try the main screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes, that's it, thank you.
Okay, so this is the project that we actually came up with.
It's not digging.
It will be in a second. Now I'll turn the sound up as much as I can. If you can't hear me over the top of it, just let me know. So the whole concept was we have the Bats Coast Shire Council, who basically provide all the A-SPEC data, all of the terrain data for reproducing Phillip Island, all the satellite photography, which had to be really high resolution. Otherwise, I can't get close enough to actually make it work properly. All of the piping systems, so the actual designs of the pipes, all of the drainage systems, so it actually showing us the actual incline for the pipes to make sure the water is calculated correctly to go down the actual pipes, and all of the vegetation. So any information that we needed for vegetation and reproducing accurate time-based vegetation growth, both for the actual plant itself and the root system, is all basically calculated to real life. So let's come along to we actually simulated the possibility of the root guard protecting piping. in all of these streets, and including the outflows. We'll see one of the previews in a second. Here we go. So this is our showcase of how root guard actually works. As far as I know, that's just a eucalyptus tree. This is actual, well, it's based on the actual growth of the roots of the tree. So without root guard, it goes absolutely crazy because it tries to find every tiny little access point for the water. And this is what happens when you're looking at the roots destroying the road, destroying the actual area around it. And of course the flow. This is without root damage. And once you got the root actually getting into the actual water flow, it builds up around the inside. And when you've got the build up in the inside, you will see the flow changing totally. So it interrupts everything you can think of in there. Sooner or later, because the root has gained access, the pipe will fail and you will get erosion under the road, for example, or under a building, or pretty much any sort of structure. And this will basically destroy the actual integrity of the structure itself. So it'll slump down until something heavy goes over it, and then it will collapse. Most people don't, in the normal world, don't actually understand how this process works. And that's what we were trying to communicate as well as we can. Now this is a little bit about king tides. So you've got the outlet, water goes up in the wrong direction, floods through the system, and you get pretty much, well, this bit is the oil spill scenario. What happens if a tanker has an accident and you got an oil spill and it actually gets into the system, floats on top over to the outlet and spreads into the actual waterways. So this would be the actual location of the, we'll see in a second. So this is the location of the spill, and as it goes to the waterway, it starts spreading into the ocean, which is detrimental, as all we know. And over time, it takes a huge toll on the actual environment. So I might just stop that there. Now, I'm not sure if everybody's seen that or not, but we have, I think George has lovingly put it onto a link on his website so we can all see it. Let's see. So basically, our whole goal in this process is to, let me see, how do I just click that off? I don't know how to get out of that.
Unshare your screen.
I'm trying to, let's see, unshare. Okay. So the whole concept behind that is that we have fluid dynamic systems that are incorporated into 3D Studio Max, which is an Autodesk product. We basically can bring pretty much any kind of data into our system so we can actually reproduce it. We have environmental simulation tools, so we can control tree growth, we can control everything to do with the wind affecting the trees, the water. However, the water will basically erode away the edge of the land, how the trees get affected by water, by wind, all that sort of stuff. So we've got all of that available to us, species specific. So we can actually put any type of plant in there and simulate the reality of what will happen. We've also got simulators for roots, of course, and basically full gravitation. So we can simulate real world in 3D. That's the whole idea. Now let's see. The outcome literally was so that we can actually showcase to, in a real world scenario, what would happen in any of these pipes during, that are basically talked about and understood in the A-SPEC scenario. So basically it's just a communication, it's an education ability to be able to bring people to the more, well, closer to the knowledge that you guys have, that you work with every day. Most people don't understand it, so we try and translate that for them. So I think that's pretty much me. Do you have any questions for me at all?
No questions, but I've just got a comment about that because Janos just grossly understated just what was involved with that. You know, so you know, that's just the kind of person he is. Like, you know, what I really loved about, you know, Janos and his team's work was that the imagery that you saw of Phillip Island and the 3D environment, they completely created that from contours that they were given. The matching of the colours were matched from an aerial photo that were provided. So none of that was actually given to them. They created it from source material, and that just shows you the power of that. And look, and the intention of doing that R&D project was to create a visualization of the impact of our day-to-day activities to underground infrastructure. So, you know, and Janos and his team are experts in doing that. So I just wanted to add that in. I know you don't like to pat yourself on the back, but that was a great project you guys did.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it looks really interesting. I really enjoyed the imagery on that one. Actually, I'm more of a picture kind of person.
Well, if anybody is interested, just talk to George. He can give you their website, our website, and you can see the rest of, well, some of the rest of the work that we've done over the last 20 years or so.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, Janos.
Thank you
to
very much.
you again, Kelly.
Thank you. If there's no more questions, I'm going to just move on to the next presentation with Belinda Baker from Open Spatial. George, if you could please make Belinda the presenter and we'll get straight into it.
Yep, and take yourself off mute, Belinda.
So just before Belinda kicks off, I don't know if everyone can hear me. It's Terence here from Open Spatial.
Yes, all good, Terence.
Fantastic. So just as an intro, I just wanted to introduce Open Spatial. Open Spatial is a software development company that develops off-the-shelf applications, which is focused on providing geospatial engineering solutions for managing spatial data from design through to surveying to construction and data management. And the relationship that we have with GISA is a long-standing relationship, and we have a long, strong history of working together between GISA and Open Spatial. The clients one of our clients, which is One and Water and One and Bull City Council, we were recognized with an APSIA Victorian Spatial Industry Award based on our collaboration and the solutions that we've deployed and assisted One and Bull with. So today I'll be handing over to Belinda, and we're going to introduce our AC/DC solution, which provides the tools and templates and workflows that enable efficient creation, validation, processing, and capture of as-con or as-constructed asset information based on A-SPEC and transforms it into a validated GIS. data file or data. So I would like to hand over to Belinda now to continue with the presentation. Thank you again, everybody.
Thanks, Terence, for that intro. So as Terence mentioned, I'm Belinda Baker from OpenSpatial. So I work as a consultant for OpenSpatial. Today I want to present this problem space that probably most of you are familiar with. So how familiar does the following sound? If you're a council or a utility who's adopted A-SPEC, you're currently receiving the shapefile. You're manually checking that shapefile. You're checking its integrity for things like its topology. For example, are the pipes snapped to the nodes? Have the correct codes been used? Does it have all the attributes you need? And this validation is probably taking you hours. Or are you on the other side of the fence and you're being requested to present A-SPEC data in compliant shapefiles or mid-MIF files to the councils and utilities? So you're using additional software outside of CAD only to be told you're missing an attribute or it's not snapped correctly. Well, introducing the AC/DC solution that takes as constructed drawings to be validated within minutes with clear error messaging to create A-SPEC compliant data. You may be familiar with the AC/DC portal for data validation, but we've now expanded it to be a comprehensive end-to-end solution. It contains the pre-existing spatial, topology, and attribute checks that run within minutes on CAD drawings to ensure A-SPEC compliance, with now additional improvements to handle supplementary as constructed documentation, easy to use drawing templates with selectable code pick lists, implementation of editable workflows and notifications to reflect your business processes, and the ability to export instantly to more GIS-ready formats. So we've had our solution for councils and utilities operational for a number of years now. Many of these customers are in the audience today, so a special shout out to Marina, Aloysius, Manoj, Paul, Zane, and Johanna in the audience. Our system, it guarantees one system where you can receive all the documentation and data you need from the asset handover, verify it with the correct members of your team, and you're guaranteed the data you receive from your surveyors and contractors will comply with the spatial and attributional requirements of the A-SPEC specification in a cost-effective package. We know this because we've had 115 surveying, consulting, engineering organizations registered, where over 900 projects completed, and upwards of 6,000 drawings validated by the AC/DC portal. In addition, we offer on a project basis for consulting, surveying, and engineers to capture and produce A-SPEC compliant CAD drawings. So this comes with pre-configured templates that contain attributes with drop-down menus, easy to enter dialog boxes, clear error markings within the drawing to assist in correcting non-compliant data, and access to the portal that allows direct export to shapefile. So the AC/DC process for both scenarios, the process is as follows. The surveyor or the contract engineer downloads the toolkit, which contains the template and menu files. The engineer creates the drawing in AutoCAD and using the template and menu files. The drawing is then submitted to the AC/DC portal, validated against the A-SPEC rule set. If there are any issues with compliance, the errors will be highlighted with color-coded circles in the drawing and also listed in a log file. The drawing can then be resubmitted until it passes the validation, at which point the compliant shapefiles will automatically be generated and can be downloaded by authorities, or for authorities that are not currently in the portal, you will be able to deliver it outside of the portal. If requested, the engineers can also upload additional documentation via the project document section of the portal. I'll now quickly run through a demonstration so you can see it in action. So when you sign up to AC/DC, an account will be created for you, and you can securely log into the portal at asconstructed.com. So once logged in, you'll end up at the AC/DC homepage. You'll then be able to create your drawings by opening the template and by selecting from the menu file to create assets. You'll note as well that as we're placing the W-SPEC, we're placing a W-SPEC hydrant. It'll draw on the W-SPEC hydrant menu layer. So as you're running through, you can also check the drawing because every asset's on the layer named in accordance with that asset. This is also an example of the drop-down menus we've got running. So we've got this where you can select the current operation of the asset, also the hydrant type, all the information you'd normally be putting in A-SPEC. From there, you can submit to the ACDC portal. So here we go to the validation section. We'll submit a new validation. We'll enter in all the details. So this is for Hassel Grove, stage 6 and 7. This is our first drawing, our first revision. It's for the Hassel Grove project. That's our validation set there. So that's the rule set that's compliant with the recent 05 versions of the A-SPEC. We'll confirm that submission. That then goes and that starts validating against those rules. So that's running through all those spatial attribute checks, as well as those linear branching checks as well. So that'll come through, that'll start validating. So you'll see that starts uploading to the portal and it's updating as it goes. So it's just opening the drawing. Once that finishes the validation, it'll show you this graph of what percentage of the errors there are. So we've got some attribute and we've got some spatial errors. So what we can do from there is download the failed drawing. We're going to open that up. So that comes in a zip file. Inside that zip file, you've got the failed drawing with the circles, and you've also got the log file in there. So this is the log file, which has got the XY locations for each of those errors. And we'll also open the drawing. So you can see some of those error markers in the drawing. So we've got yellow for our attribute errors. So I think there's a lookup code issue. One of the strings is too long. So it's also validating data type, data size. We've also got some spatial errors, so some geometry errors. Some things like there's a label, an attribute block not attached. Also checking the geometry. So is it meant to be a polygon asset? If so, it should be a closed polyline. So we've got those checks running as well. Things like minimum edge length, extents, there's a few checks in there. So from there, we'll go and we'll correct those errors. We're going to re-upload it to the portal again. This is us submitting it through. It's going to run through that validation again. You can see it run through. And after that runs through, you'll end up with a certified result. And you know that's passed. So straight away, you're able to download that GIS file. There's also a validated file available, which has the object data, which you can use to export out to other formats. So here we've got all the shape files. So you've got a shape file for every asset, all with all the attributes you need. You can just zip this off and send this straight to council, or if you're the council, you can bring this straight into your systems. So what that looks like in GIS, so this is in QGIS. You can see we're looking at a lighting asset here. There's all the attributes there. Also got our polygon assets. So this is some cul-de-sacs in a new greenfield subdivision. So we've got, this is our A-SPEC pavement, and it's got all the attributes within here as well. Okay, now that I've shown you the ACDC solution, I'd like to hand over to Peter, who's been using the system over the last couple of years.
Thanks, Belinda. Am I online? Hello? Hello?
Yes. Loud and clear.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my name's Peter Woodhouse. I'm a development engineer with a subdivision contractor in Warrnambool in the southwest of Victoria. I've been on with them for the last 12 months to assist with enhancing their as constructed drawing, certification and submission to councils for approval so they can get statement of compliance for subdivisions. That's in the last 12 months. So, and with the ACDC solution in my former years, I've had 24 years in the consulting engineering, doing designs, documentation, construction, supervision, and as constructed drawings in various phases. And prior to that, I was in in-house civil engineering team in local government in the East Gippsland area. Now, I guess for running through the processes that have taken place in, I suppose, last century, there was all the engineering assets were handled by engineering departments in-house with their own staff, and that was all fine when there wasn't an onerous or quite a deal of data required for asset collection. But this century, and for the last 20 years, there's been various enhancements to that and requirements by council for the handover. Once you've got design drawings, the early phases were red line markup of design plans, but it was quickly determined that that wasn't suitable for councils. Not enough data and most times not accurate. But with the GPS component, gradually, well, before that, design plans were then required to be redrafted with as constructed drawings, but that was quite an onerous cost event and almost the same cost as preparing design drawings again for water, sewer, stormwater, roadworks, the whole lot. But in the last 10 years, well, particularly in the last 5 years in the Southwest District, as Belinda described earlier, that the Wannon Water and Warrnambool City at the forefront decided to get involved with the ACDC solution and made that a development requirement for developers doing subdivisions to provide data in that format for their use in their assets team. Now they took a very good. They actually provided training. Wannon Water and Warrnambool City got on board with the ACDC solution and provided training for all the consultants in the area, and I was really pleased that I was a bit dubious earlier about the amount of information in, but overall the cost to produce as constructed drawings has had a saving of at least 30%, if not 50%, in the time to prepare those as constructed drawings and to get the format signed off by councils. Now, in where I am now at Rogers, initially I started off continuing on with my usual work in getting the surveyor to do the GPS location of every item installed, pipes, invert levels, grades, or all the spatial data, and then position of fittings for water mains, and every asset that goes in the ground. And that was onerous if you're reproducing a design plan module. But with the A-SPEC data, you can specifically target a water main or a stormwater line and treat that separately and add attributes for every piece of pipe or water main or sewer, and providing a concise drawing presentation, a line with all the information on it that will eventually go to councils with all that data provided is quite a valuable asset. Now, currently, I've been training up the survey team who now collect the data and process it, and from that process, they then bring that data online with ACDC. They can input it and validate it and know that they've done the right thing. With what Belinda showed you with the validation is real life in terms of the time it takes to validate any data you put into the package. It's only a minute return, and then you've got a concise list of if there's any errors or any omissions. It's an excellent package that the survey team or anyone with a spatial recognition of data can train up to input that information. And particularly at Roger Constructions, we're probably well, as a consulting engineer, sometimes you don't get all the data that's going under the ground. But being in the construction field, part of it, all that data is available for you to accurately input all the asset information into the A-SPEC data format.
Thanks, Peter.
Yep, thank you. So it is a really cost-effective system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next presenter today is Chris McInnery from the City of Coburn, and he's going to talk about practical use. He's going to talk about a project he's been working on. I won't try and explain it. I'll bet best if Chris does it. So I'll just hand you over to Chris. George, if you could please make him the presenter, and Chris, if you have unmuted yourself, that's great. Let's go.
Okay, good morning everyone, and can everyone hear me? Or Kelly, can you hear me, George?
Yes, all good.
Great. Okay. Okay, so, well, first of all, my slides are a bit stuck this morning. I apologise for that. I would have had a lot more custom diagrams, and I would have loved to have a video with music, as we just heard before, but that wasn't to be. So I'm just going to talk about, and I'm not big into PowerPoint anyway, but I'm just going to talk about some of the things we do here at the City of Coburn and some of the things that we've been doing recently to process the incoming A-SPEC data. And this is more the focus on A-SPEC because that's what I work on specifically. So just going through the points there, it has gone through several stages. So we've been on A-SPEC for about 10 years or so, I've been told. That was before I started working here. We started by using map basic scripts running map info, and we still do use them for bits and pieces from time to time, but we have actually made a major move between software vendors. I know that there's vendors online this morning. So we're now using various selections from the Esri kit. So for desktop processing, that's ArcGIS Pro, and then for deployable, we're using things like Portal and AGOL and so on. And our data is stored in the enterprise geodatabase once we've brought it all in and then processed. So a lot of the processing is done using Python scripts, and so that was a fairly good job going from MapBasic to Python. Below, there have been some, I've done some attempts to just use Visual Studio to provide some user interfaces, although as the months have passed, I've been using that less and less, because just finding other ways of doing things, it doesn't really need any user input. And I was considering doing a demonstration, but then I realised that, well, the only thing people are going to see is just a script running up the screen and just seeing temporary output for debugging purposes. So it would have been a bit disinteresting, really, because it just all runs in the background. And that's good news for us, because the user just has to sit there and basically do nothing apart from watch it, and then go in afterwards and then make sure everything's all okay. Good. So as it says there, the main aim of all this is just to automate boring stuff. So previously it would have taken us up to maybe 5 to 6 hours to process one subdivision project stage. That's been whittled down to less than an hour, and anticipating about maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And so by using some of the obscure bits and pieces that popped up searching through the Python documentation. I'm just trying to change slides here. Okay, so that's a diagrammatic overview. Okay, so just the bright lime green box on the top left, the subdivision data as constructed comes in. So we use FME translators. It's just a very basic license that we've got for that. Mainly, even though we do request extra shape files, we know that we're going to get it in mid-MEF or MapInfo tab still, or it will come in shape files, in which case we may not need to use it. Again, it's only a very basic use of FME, just to translate the incoming data into extra shapes. It then goes through the desktop GIS processing. That's just a very cursory box I've got there. As I mentioned before, Python scripts to process all those shape files. And then over on the right, it pushes it into I've got SQL database there, but it is actually an enterprise database. We save the incoming ASCON files and then convert it to our own preferred storage format for A-SPEC and D-SPEC. And that is really a combination of three things. First of all, it is the A-SPEC format. Then it is some of the storage requirements or the identification requirements that we have for the road segments and the pipe segments that come in, and how we store them and how we like to report on them. And then there's for asset management as well. And once we have it in there, so it gets grafted onto quite a few more columns from the raw A-SPEC as it has come in. And then after that, it is used within asset management. They have their own system, online mapping. So at the moment, we are jumping from one system to another. And so we do have a suite of portal modules set up for publication and an actual, and giving the user ends a bit more control of what they can do with the data. And then we also have to be compliant with main roads here in WA. Okay, so handling the incoming data, one thing that's fairly important for us is to, what are the polygons along a street sample line? I don't have visible values to everyone, but you can just see the road numbers and the road section numbers. So they're in a sequential order, and then when I come to an intersection, I have to put the capital I in there just to identify that it is an intersection. And that's handy for field crews when they go out. In one way, it's a bit of an antiquity. It might be antiquated, but it is a very handy method of identifying in that intersection to store it in that reportable stream. Now, to calculate the road numbers and the road section numbers, so that again is all automated, and we use linear referencing, and specifically in the Python code, query point distance is a very handy function to use. Some people might be familiar with that. But yeah, so we have gone into quite a level of detail using the Python code to perform these specific tasks, which used to be keyed in manually. Also, we calculate the curve lengths for each segment. So for that, we need to use flat buffering. And if we're using Esri, that means we can pay for a premium license, which actually we don't have. So we had to use a fair bit of brute force coding to, and using just a lot of vector mathematics, the product rule, cross products, or the law of determinants to identify when it was actually butting up against a neighbouring polygon. We'd say buffer out the polygon, and if it buffers the neighbouring polygon, then you just slice it, and you get these nice even flathead buffers. And from that, we use a clip analysis to determine the curve type and the curve length that belongs to that road section. Okay, so we're applying the unique IDs to the segments, so there's probably no surprise there, but I guess a lot of LGAs do that, and also use IDs to link the car parks and footpaths footpaths to road segments. So I don't know, it's not obvious on screen there, but say for example a car park or a footpath would have that road section number, and then have, for example, the footpaths would have been identified by using the character string saying L or R, depending on whether it's to the left or right, depending on the flow of traffic away from the city or where the post box numbers or how the post box numbers are ascending. Okay, so as I just mentioned briefly before, linear referencing, that is a fairly important concept while we are doing our processing. And I'll just go back one slide. So just about these ideas. So first port of call is to take each polygon, create its own unique polygon, as you can see in the first column there. Then it identifies whether it is an intersection or not. And if it is it a through road? Now, if it's not an intersection, it is a through road. If it is an intersection, it may or may not be. And that sorts of things that we get the code to do for us. It then generates a new road number and just looks up the geodatabase to find what the next incremented value is. Then we need to figure out what the road section number is, the area, and the length. Now, that is just in a temporary table. It's just called polygons, and that helps us to identify, okay, where are the roads, where do they, what distance are they going to be along a road centerline, and what their unique IDs should be. Okay, so again, just keeping on the use of the IDs, with the latest version of A-SPEC, there is the unique ID column, but once we've processed, we find that we do get repeating groups. I've just highlighted a few there. So we've got surface, quadruple 0 and 17. So we've had to use our own poly ID column just to generate our own IDs. And then you've got the street number there. However, what is really handy with the latest version of A-SPEC is having the unique IDs and being able to and making sure that they are in fact unique. We do often get data where we might have a road polygons come in, but the unique ID goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And so we have repetitions in there, and we found that using the scripts early on, it would fall over and fail because in a way it was like internal validation. So if any of the vendors online have got the ideas for that, then we'd be happy to listen. You can just see as part of the screen capture, again, I've got the surface polygons visible, and then underneath that are the pavements. So the surface polygons replace the older pavement width, and then we also have the pavement up, and so the surface just goes from, it just represents the road surface, and then the pavement is from the back of the curb to the back of the curb on either side of the road. They're not spatially dependent though on each other, so there's going to be variation, and it can be a bit of a trick to try and associate those together, and that's why we need to use spatial joins. Okay, so just talking about IDs and joins, do we use topology or spaghetti? So this is a bit of an old topic in GIS land. Spatial data is very organic, even within the built-up environment. So we're talking about things which have been built out in the field and then picked up in the field as part of an ASCON survey. But even so, you're building around the natural environment as well, and we have to keep that in mind. It's going to come with variation, and we have to account for that. So spatial data does have the advantage of topology, just by its very nature. that can be implicitly stored, and that was probably a much older method of doing it, which people used to do back in the 90s, but because of computer speeds, a lot of people moved towards a spaghetti data model, which because of the speed, and mainly because of the speed of computers. But we can also use those spatial objects to do things like table joins. So, for example, if you're using Esri, you can use the need to clause to find which polygons are lying directly on top of or take up the most amount of space on another polygon. And the example is finding out which polygon belongs to a seal polygon. Now, ideally, having foreign keys, just to use a bit of database speak, is ideal in this situation, but maybe not for field collection, because we're getting the data in subdivision per subdivision or stage per stage. And the end result is that that's not going to, that doesn't really match up the entirety of the database if we start storing foreign keys and primary keys just in the one job. But it's also expecting the consulting surveyor to support your wishes for referential integrity, and it's probably not practical to do so. And just as I mentioned there, the last point, there's the pavement seals are not always dependent on each other, so we've got to work around that, and the best way to do it is with spatial joins. So just as I mentioned at the top of the next slide, spatial joins can work. It does account for the possibility of having one-to-many. You can see there that just with that intersection, I've got the seal polygons lying directly on top of polygons. I've got the row section numbers as well as the seal unique IDs and the pavement unique IDs. So in a perfect world, it would be great to have the seal IDs as a primary key, but then have the pavement IDs as a foreign key. But as I mentioned before, that really is probably not practical to do. Okay, so using spatial joins is the solution, but as I've said there, it must be supervised during the processing. And it, again, can only work within the one project or one stage of the subdivision in our case. And that's because this data is going to be added onto the rest of the enterprise database data. And again, we have to come up with other ways of uniquely identifying each row on the table or each feature within spatial data. Okay, so some handy tools in spatial processing, I just mentioned it very briefly before. Linear referencing will be ordering polygons along a central line, or it doesn't have to be polygons, points. Using the near-to clause in spatial joins, and then using
1 minute.
Sure. So using click analysis. Yes.
Just giving you a 1 minute wrap up.
Okay, sure.
Left of your time.
Yep, as I did mention before, and that was it anyway. So thanks for listening. And are there any questions?
That was good timing. Questions, anyone? Okay, well, thank you, Chris. Again, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll follow all those up during George's presentation. Our next presentation is actually some training from Gabby, and he's going to talk to you about data validation in QGIS and show you how that's done. So over to you, Gabby.
Kelly, I'm going to talk a little bit more about more than just the data validation, but I will be touching on that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right.
All right. Not a problem. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity. So I want to start off by just asking this question. So what's the point? And here's a few quotes that I've been able to get. Now, some of these have actually, I've gone and tried to refresh, and I actually, they are still as fresh as ever. So what's the point here? Data becomes an asset when it's transformed into information, is probably one of the most important bits here. But it only becomes useful when it is able to facilitate actionable insights. That's when we know that our data has got quality and is free of defects or defects. And this is something that was said by someone, or a group of people from the CPA journal in 2019. Carrying on with what's the point? Accurate data is the fuel that propels government organizations towards achieving their mission. I think the critical thing here is that it is time to view data as a critical strategic asset and treat it accordingly. And this comes from the Deloitte Insights. So what's the point really? Without complete, accurate, and reliable data, you don't really have information. Your conclusions are questionable, your decisions are flawed, and this is the clincher: you're still responsible. So even if you don't have good and accurate and clean data, you remain responsible for your assets and for whatever happens and the impact that they may have. So what is it that we do at Digital Hive? We offer data support services to the A-SPEC community. And what we're trying to do is we want to take you on a journey where we normally start that journey with mapping your data structures. And we do that through structural gap analysis, things like that. We help you to create compliant data structures using SQL scripts. So what I mean by that is we work together with Gesta, and for every version of the A-SPEC data standard, we will give you, we provide a SQL create scripts. But we don't just stop there. We're also providing you with, we maintain those scripts. We help organizations by providing incremental updates. So as you grow, or as the script develops, we will provide incremental updates. And finally, we offer a service to do data audits, so that it doesn't help to be completely on top of all the structures. You also need to know what's going on in your data, and you need to make sure that your data, that there's no gaps in the data, because I want to remind you of that first quote: if your data isn't clean and able to help you to take decisions, then you are still responsible, and it becomes difficult. Okay, enough about that. Let's talk about web services and APIs. Why web services? Why APIs? So web service helps us to ensure a single source of truth. It gives us the ability to provide real-time updates, and it facilitates interoperability, and is a non-exclusive method for cooperation. Web services give us searches on steroids, and it's fairly easy to work with. Now, at A-SPEC, or together with A-SPEC, we are developing a set of web services. Currently, all the code lists are available as web services, and pretty soon we'll have the data structures and the data documentation available as web services. I shouldn't say pretty soon, but we are working on those. We need to get the first one out of the door first. So what are the possible applications for the code lists, for the code list API that we've developed? It can help organizations to automate the download on a regular basis, so that you always have the right codes, and then disseminate those to both your asset management and your GIS teams. We can also create live links to the codeless APIs and embed those in desktop GIS and asset management systems. Or you can use the API-based mobile web applications for searching. You can automate updates on devices. Councils who use some other codes can create extra codes, so they can add to the code list that's outside. We are saying that if that happens, we would like to know why it's done. Is it really necessary, and how can we work towards unified code lists? We can provide you with multidimensional codes. Our vision is to develop a national code list for everyone with mapping to different code lists. And so the idea is to use the code lists from A-SPEC. Now, you will know, George may repeat this, but A-SPEC has gifted its code list library into the public domain, and we've worked on some national standards with in terms of those code lists, and so they are available to a wider audience. What we want to do is we want to work with whoever to develop a national standard of code lists, or a code list that's common amongst everyone. And the reason for that should be fairly obvious. We would like to minimize confusion, and we want to work towards everybody being on the same page, really. Now, web services should be for everyone. And if I look at a web service, it's very simple. You have a URL, and then you have a bunch of key value pairs. So this is a little bit of the training that we're going to be doing, just so that people understand. And here's what ours look like. And the first time, if you look at this, you're going to think, oh, it looks a bit gobbledygook. But I want to just draw your attention to this bit. There's a URL. You just copy and paste that. And here's an API key and some text afterwards. So that's a key value pair. A page size is a key, and a value pair, and the filter is just something similar. And what I'm going to show you now is how I can actually use that. Sorry, if I can get my browser to come across. And I'm going to practically bring one up. So here's that previous URL that I've had. And if I can just go and, here's a key, there's a value that I'm going to send across. I'm just going to change that to say D-SPEC. I'm going to copy that and paste that into my browser. And there you go. I've got a massive data file. What can I do with that? Now, your IT information, your IT departments normally will know what to do with this. That'll be fairly straightforward for them. But I can save the file, and I can use it in my web application, or in my desktop applications, or whatever. But there's also other ways in which I can work with code lists, and I want to show you some of those. So what I've got over here is that gobbledygook view that you saw earlier on. But what I've done is we've provided a front end to it. And that front end will help you to understand what's going on, or to easier search the various elements. So what I've got here is, sorry, I cleaned that. By just typing in a D there, it filters the code list and gives me all the D-SPEC codes. Okay. Let's say I'm interested in drain linear material. I can just go in and say, I want to know all about drain linear material. And there's the drain linear material. And I can now use this in my application if I wanted to. Let's say I needed to know what a particular code was. So I'm going to clear that. I want to know what is fine GR. Now, I just had to type in fine, and up comes fine GR is used in D-SPEC in two different code lists, but it really means fine gravel, and that looks like it's a new code under this particular code list, right? We can use it in a different way. If I have to capture something and I don't know what code to use, I can, and I know it's some kind of a sand, so I can go, give me the sand, give me all the sands, and now I can go through and go and find everything that is sand, and that's fairly straightforward. There's all the codes. So very easy to search, very easy to get to particular codes. Much quicker than, I believe, than going to your to the Excel spreadsheets and searching in there. What I want to do now is to actually take you a little bit further, and let's say I have the source list. I'm looking for sources, and I want to use this in an application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as a CSV file. There it is, saved as my CSV file, and show that in my downloads. There it is. I'm going to open up my QGIS, and I'm just going to drag that and drop it. Sorry, before I drag and drop it, I want to rename it, and I want to call it source. Okay. And yeah, it exists. Okay, I'll just take that one. Drag and drop it within a QGIS environment. And now I'm going to associate that with one of these assets that I've already got. So what I'm going to do here is just go properties. Now, in QGIS, you have all these tabs on the left-hand side, and normally people look at the fields. There is another one underneath here. It's called the attribute for. And I'm just going to associate that, the API list with the source. And I'm going to do that by changing the widget type to a value of relation. Well, I've already done this before, but I'll talk it through. Normally, when you look at these, you would be in a text, when you look at any of the fields, you'll have a text edit associated. What you'll have to do is to go and change it to a value relation. You have to pick the table that you want to use, and then pick the column that's going to be used as a code, and the column that's going to be used as a description. Now, I've just taken those as they came out from the web service. And if I now go and capture a new tree, I'll just put it down over here. If I scroll down to the source, you'll see that I've got a drop down on the source, and everything that was in the web service is now available as a selection within my application. Now I've done it in a very manual way. But there is also a different way of doing this, and I will be showing you that in the next part of this a little bit later on. I'm not going to save this because this is actual real data, and I don't want to mess up that data. Right, the next part I want to talk about is, before I actually show you any demonstration, I'm going to just very quickly talk about what is asset data integrity. There's different types of asset data integrity. The first part is physical data integrity. And we can only help you with that by providing proper training. And that's all got to do with data formats and data packages and how to handle them and how to do backups, etc. So that's really out of scope, but in terms of the bigger picture, that is part of asset data integrity. The other part, one of the other speakers have actually touched on this before, or elements of this. The other part of data asset integrity is logical integrity. And logical integrity can be divided into different types. We have entity integrity. So how unique is your data? How many?
Gabby,
Okay.
I'll let you know you've got 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I'll zip it up. Logical data integrity refers to the logical uniqueness of your data. Referential, and this is where it becomes interesting, is how different assets relate to, say, the area of works, and how different assets relate to one another. Now we have a topology model built in, but other people will be using a spaghetti model and then calculate the relationships afterwards, and that's a different discussion. But the point is that you have to pay attention to all of your data integrity. There's also the domain integrity. Within a domain, certain applications have, or certain assets have a certain behavior versus other assets. So I'm just going to jump back and hopefully be able to show you some of those integrity tests and tools that you can, or processes that you can apply within A-SPEC. Within your application for A-SPEC. So what I've got over here is a code list. This is the complete code list. I got this by downloading it, the file as I was showing you, the gobbledygook file showing you earlier, and then just linking it into the application. Don't have time to show that, but if anybody wants us to, we can show that in detail. What we also have here, I'm going to first of all show you, if I capture a pipe, I'm just going to capture a pipe. What we've got over here is the attributes of that pipe, and there's a few things that you need to see. First of all, this pipe number is highlighted in yellow, and there's a yellow cross. So it says that something is wrong, and that's because the referential integrity on that particular pipe has not been populated. If I go to the positional data section, there's a whole bunch of these things. Now, notice that some of the things have been automatically populated. So this is just the data, an element that was inserted, but these are actually coordinates that were calculated. So we've set up a process where those coordinates were calculated. And what I wanted to show you, if I go and I type in values for, say, the upstream pipe and the downstream pipe, and I know that those are silly values, and I go back, then you'll see that the pipe number is now qualifies, or is now fine. All of those tests, or integrity tests, we can do by entering different elements within the attribute forms that we have available. Now, this one, the example I'm showing is QGIS. This is available in other GIS software, but you have to go out and you've got to go and make sure that all of those things are actually populated. And I think I've run out of time. I wanted to just show you that it's not rocket science. It looks complex, but if you just put your mind to it, you'll be able to get to it. Kelly, how am I doing? Am I now? Over to you.
Have one more. Yeah, you could have one more minute if you have another thing you want to quickly show.
No, 1 minute's not enough. Let's leave it at that. Any questions?
So
None?
doesn't feel like there's any questions. So what I might do now is hand over to George for the final wrap up, and also open the floor to questions as well. But I'll let George manage that section. I'll just hand you over. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kelly. Okay, so here we go, the wrap up. And look, and thank you everybody for, particularly the presenters, for doing what you had to do to have your presentation be completed today. Okay, so in my session, these are the typical points that we covered through our forums, and we want to highlight on some of the learnings. So we did a lot of live polling to gauge your understanding and also back up our gut feel, because the two earlier forums where we didn't have Menti, we really, I think a lot of the time we were just guessing. So let's look at why you attended. So this is something that we ran across all of the polls. And as you can see, quite a large interest around passion around data and integrity. And also the predominant reason was to increase understanding of the specifications. And look, all of those reasons are valid, and it lends us to look at how we can, or what we can provide in our next series, and the importance of those. So, perfect segue from Gabby's session around code lists. So we're going to have a look at this because we wanted to understand how you interact with them. So in this slide here, you can see that there's a variety of responses. And it was an interesting observation. The top result, where it shows 5 responses download from the A-SPEC website, that's an indication of the most recent adopters, and that came about from our sessions within the water and sewer forums. The bottom 2 are around the open space and also the A-SPEC, the road asset infrastructure space. So as you can see that we have some historical patterns of use there, which is indicative of the diagram on the bottom left, and the more recent adopters are going straight to the website to download the spreadsheets. We're also curious about the software you used. And as you can see in this particular diagram, we've got some examples of what was put in here. And on the bottom right says As Constructed Design Sir. That actually refers to the As Constructed Design certification process of OpenSpatial's AC/DC. The thing that we noticed there was that there is a difference between the kind of products used with local government and the kind of products used within the water sector space. Now, talking about code changes as well, one of the primary reasons for our forums was to discuss proposed changes. And it was pretty clear to us that there was appetite for changes, particularly when it came to clarification. So in this particular instance, and I'm just bringing up one of the things that came up with A-SPEC, where we wanted to harmonize the codes, because the codes that are shown there weren't actually reflective of the intent. So, so we would put to our community the change that was proposed, and so that the codes were reflective of the intent. And as you can see from the results, there's a strong desire for these kind of changes, and it puts rigor into the specifications. And we also had a look at, here's another example where we changed from flat curb to flush curb. Now, it doesn't seem like a big change. However, it makes such a big difference to put that robustness in there. And we also asked you how you'd like us to communicate with you. So as you can see, there's an overwhelming preference for email communication. Yeah, not we haven't teased out what the other is at the moment, but you know, webinars, addendums, those sorts of things. So we took it to the next step and we said, well, let's put this into context. And some of the comments that came back was, okay, minor changes via email, major changes via a seminar or webinar, and also the current process where we've provided documents with highlights of the changes. That's also a preferred method. So we've taken these on board, and this is what we're going to build into our processes to make sure that we communicate to you as we need to, depending on the kind of change that there is. Now, there's been a lot of conversation around managing data integrity, and Lara started off the conversation for us around the importance of trusted data. So for us, it's about data-driven decision-making. And it's fundamental that these 4 principles are taken into account. And Gabby touched on these in a bit of detail. So I won't go into it too much, but it really comes back to, if we're going to put the foundations in place, then we really need to focus on putting our data structures such that there is consistency, such that there is no question about what's contained in it, which will create confidence and reduce the number of instances. And as you've seen from our presenters, there's a lot of emphasis around the data quality, the accuracy, the completeness, the relevance of it. And we want to continue with that. And, you know, so it may seem like a minor thing, however, we are really prescriptive. It supports the validation processes. That is the key thing. And then I found this funny little cartoon about data-driven decision-making, which I thought I would put in here. I'll give you a few seconds to read that. Okay, data delivery. Another important feature. You know, we're always looking at what organizations are using. What are they coming up against? So, you know, the structure is set. We want to provide flexibility in the exchange process. And again, our presenters talked about the flexibility that they had in kind of formats that they were receiving, the kind of outputs they could deliver. And I love this little diagram, this little cartoon. Excel is not a database. Excel is not a database. Excel is not a database. So Excel is not a database. It may be an interim measure. Start having a look at what the future looks like for you, so that you can put some rigor into your processes. Chris showed in his presentation the kind of effort that's gone into automating some of the tasks and the work that's gone into making sure that there's consistency in their data. You know, once it's delivered to you. So one part is getting it to you. The other part is what councils do with it after they get it. So, you know, A-SPEC was when we first introduced the Menti polling, and it's been fantastic. So here's an example of the kind of data exchange formats that we've asked you about. And again, we can see the top right is an indication of the water sector, one of the one of the questions we asked there, and the bottom two are around O and A-SPEC. So you can see with O and A-SPEC, it's you know, it's a tight ball game around MIF, MID, or Esri shapefiles, and we know that they're easy to create those data sets. Interestingly, there's a predominance that we've seen with using Esri products in the water sector. Nothing wrong, just an interesting observation. And we also had a look at the kind of software that you use in relation to A-SPEC. And again, we saw MapInfo and QGIS being prominent, and we saw other packages, you know, MicroStation, LizCAD, you know, AutoCAD. There's a number of CAD formats still out there. And yes, and Microsoft Excel has snuck in there. That's okay. In the preparation of your data, we also use it. I brought this slide up again because what I want to show you is that whilst local government has a proliferation of different formats, different software products that they use, it's less so in the water sector, which is interesting, and it's showing a trend. Digital twins, the representation of the physical world. From the outset, we've spoken about digital twins and how A-SPEC really forms the foundation of a digital twin. Again, if we're looking about trusted data, we need to put the emphasis on putting the structure in place. You know, Ken was gracious enough to talk about the impact that ACE or the initial D-SPEC had on the industry about looking at the bigger picture, and you know, and we continue to look at it. I would have loved to have coined this phrase digital twin back when we first started, but you know, it doesn't really matter. What is important is that we continue this process, and we're not just, this isn't, to us, this isn't just about talking about it. What we're now seeing is how people are incorporating into their 3D modeling. And I've shown this example before, but I wanted to bring it up again, where we've got a proliferation of classification systems that are being used, and there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace around this. So our view around the incorporation of A-SPEC into 3D models, 3D CAD packages, is provide it as an extract such that you can work with it to link that particular object that's highlighted in blue in your asset management system. So your extract might look like this, which is fine. Most IT specialists can work with this data. They know the structure of it. It's when it's unstructured that they creates issues for them. So this is about taking data into your asset management environment and then linking it back. And we saw quite a bit of interest from the question around wanting to link to an asset management environment. And it makes sense because we're dealing with asset data. The other thing that came up was during the workshops, there were shouts out for requests for information. In this particular instance, there was a request during the workshop for a building service level hierarchy. Now, if we're promoting a knowledge sharing community, then it makes sense that it's not just us at GISA that are pushing information around and sharing it with you. So the question came up during the workshop, and our colleague at Busselton City Council sent this through to us, which is now available for anybody who'd like to get access to it. So if you'd like to get access, send us an email at info@gisa.com.au, and I'd be happy to send this through to you if you're looking at a kind of structure for yourself, for your hierarchy. Change of attribute names is a critical thing. Again, it's about being fit for purpose. In this particular example, we're looking at the difference between floor underscore LEV to be renamed to floor_HT. So what are we really talking about? We're talking about making something that's fit for purpose. So is it the floor elevation or the floor height? Now, in our description, we had the height above the ground. Now, that doesn't fit in with the floor elevation per se, because in technical terms, the floor elevation is usually a reduced level based on AHD. Whereas what we're talking about is how many meters from the ground is this? Is it 10 meters? Is it 20 meters? So we put this to the community, and again, it was agreed that that would be a change. Now, had it not been for a consultant looking at this as part of our community, then this would never have come to light. Because for us, you know, it was fine. It was working. But here's the thing about A-SPEC. It's about the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly. And, you know, creating this space of contribution is really what's critical for us. Now, one of the highlights was by far the largest audience that we had was for D-SPEC. We had 102 registrations. So, you know, it really was pleasing to see the level of interest. And it's no surprise because D-SPEC has been, was initially launched in 2004. So it's quite a mature environment. And what we're now seeing is typically most of the changes were around new codes and fewer requirements for clarifications. And that's probably evident of the maturity of the organizations using the spec, also the maturity of the spec. So these are the kind of clarifications. Now, you know, we have this whole environment around swales, which is still quite new. But in this particular case, this consultant took it on themselves and to resolve a potential issue of, well, how do we know the direction of flow of the swales? So they've gone to great lengths around segmenting them according to the direction of flow. Now, this makes perfect sense to me and hopefully to the asset owners who are receiving this data, because it gives them some clarity about the structure of their swales and provide them with an opportunity of how they can program their works based on the impact of working on a specific swale. As I mentioned, introduction of Menti for live polling. Now, that's been really important for us. And thanks to Kelly for introducing it to us and also for Gabby. This has really made a difference because after starting it with A-SPEC, we really saw that there was a lot of interest around the interaction with the sessions. They became far more interactive. And in fact, we started putting these kinds of questions out, hard landscaping or pathways. Well, we wanted to know the sector, so we were getting these kind of results. And if you're on your Menti poll, you will have your next question there. So please have a look at that. We'd like you to see what you would suggest for this. Is it a pathway or is it an A-SPEC boardwalk? So that's the kind of differentiation that we want to make. So it really comes down to the understanding of the purpose of that particular asset. So thank you for the people who have already responded to that. I made that available a bit earlier and we've already been getting some responses. But essentially what we're talking about is it's a boardwalk. So that's the kind of feedback to make sure that we are on the right path, that we're on the same page as what you are. And A-SPEC was our next largest audience with 87 registrations. And again, no coincidence, it's our most mature specification. There are no new asset classes being proposed, but we wanted to see what your appetite was for new asset classes. And here's an indication of the kind of things that have come up. Now, in the majority of those cases, they are already covered. So the great thing is that for new adopters of A-SPEC coming up with what they think they want for new assets, they now have an opportunity to go into the spec and to link it up. So, you know, there's a great opportunity there. So, in summary, the appetite for new assets comes down to a maturing environment is a demand for new assets. A growing council is a demand for new assets. Councils with the status quo, you know, obviously not so much because they're dealing with what they're dealing with. The interesting thing for us is that councils are now taking up water and sewer spec features, which is typically not their area, but they're now seeing that in their precincts that they're managing, they've got that kind of data. And, you know, sometimes we don't get the answer that we want. You know, it comes back as a no. Subsurface utilities. It was interesting. There was little or no knowledge about this particular standard. So, you know, D, S, and W spec are aligned with it, and Gabby and I were on the technical committee. So if you want to know more information, we can provide you some details. Please don't hesitate to follow up. There are going to be attributes from time to time that are added. Area works identifier is a particular attribute that will be identified. That will be added. Sorry, I've got identifier on the brain. How can we support you? We're really interested in, you know, how you want to be communicated with and how we can support you with other things. So here's some of the examples that came through. And again, you know, we're recording this session, so if you've missed something along the way or you wanted to read a screen a bit more detail, we'll make this recording available to you. And we put a metric for improvement. Now, when we first started A-SPEC, you know, the feedback was okay. You know, we were getting the message across and we were getting used to polling people. But what was really pleasing was that by the time we did A-SPEC, W-SPEC, we saw that the metrics had changed around our feedback. So we're really pleased that we were able to provide some value and, you know, getting used to changes we'd adopted midway through our series. So before I do the final wrap up, you know, I wanted to take some time to, you know, to ask some questions. We've been promising it as we've been going along. So, you know, here's our time to ask some questions. So does anybody have a burning question that they would love to ask of one of our presenters?
I have a question, actually, George.
Yes.
And it's to Lara. Just what most organisations find it hard to get the needed buy-in and funding for data governance adoption?
Thank you for asking that question. That's the million-dollar question that it's always at everyone's lip. And you would think it's so obvious that that would be on top of everyone's data strategy, that data governance is no-brainer. If with everything we've been talking about today, talking about the essence, the importance of the integrity of the data, having the data trusted, making sure that we're ingesting good data in so that the outcome will be good for us. You would think that would be easy sell. No, that's not the case. And I think it's a lot of things kind of in the mix. Over the years, my observation has always been the fact that well, data governance doesn't always sound kind of sexy when you're talking about you want to do anything analytics and you know, produce some widgets, or, you know, there's always that speed to delivery of a product, even if that product is not going to be viable, even if that product is not going to meet the requirements of the consumer. We ran through an era where we're just producing stuff that we're not listening to our customers. But over the years, I think we're getting a little bit, you know, education around the fact that we need to listen to our consumers all the time, especially in a digital age where really the competitive edge you have is very, very slim. And in order for you to gain that edge, you need to know what your customers are saying. And our customers are always leaving us feedback constantly all the time, even be they're browsing our webs and looking at, you know, it's kind of looking at an Amazon experience. And I always use my favorite example with the Amazon over here where they do the same day delivery. And we wonder how Amazon is able to do that. And it's simply because they've been using the power in their data. They've been governing their data for a very long time. That's where the reason why Amazon is one of the front runners in the governance adoption, because they can see where you and I are, what we're browsing and what we're not putting into the cart, that I might have been looking at an object and just admiring it and not putting it in the cart for a couple of times. Simply by the number of clicks you make on that item, they're watching you. They make sure that if you know, there's an algorithm there that if you've been looking at an item for X number of times and it never made it to the shopping cart, they simply go take that and put it into the nearest shipping or warehouse location close to your house. It's a bait. And then the next time you go shopping, they will put that in there and say, this item is available for the same day delivery. They're watching you, they're getting feedback. But what's been going on with the data governance not being, taken seriously over the years is the fact that most organizations, one, I would say we haven't been our leaders that are really data champions, because the hedge you create in your governance adoption is going to be driven by whoever is really pivoting that, who is driving your data initiatives. So you need to hire right. You need to hire data champions that truly understand what's going on, understand your strategic vision, where you want to go as an organization. If you have that, it's going to be and you don't want to overpromise as well. Overpromising often kills that, because you can boil the ocean with data governance initiatives. So all of this come into the picture, but the biggest thing is the driver. Who is driving your data initiative? They're gonna be the ones to either, I always say, either drive you south or drive you north. And that's really the key.
Look, that's just really great. Thank you for that, Lara. And it's a really important topic. And I experienced recently a client who said, "Look, I can't get money for data capture." I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Well, my manager won't actually give me any money for data capture." I said, "What do you want it for?" He said, "Well, I've got to provide him all these analytics, but with the data that I have, I can't give him the answers. So, it's useless." I said, "Have you told him that?" "Oh, no, I haven't." I said, "Well, you may want to flip your story around why you want to go collect this extra data, because it's for his report. It's not because you want to go capture data." It was just so, you just represents me to that, Lara, because, people need to put it into context. So thank you for that. Ellie?
Thanks, George. Thanks, Lara. Sorry, I just want to bring your attention to Joe Ferreira, who has a question. Joe, did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay there?
Yep.
Yep. All right. This was the first time I've seen ACDC for A-SPEC. I've recently been introduced to it, Vale and Water down Geelong Way. They use it for their sewer and water, but certainly not in an A-SPEC environment. The example you showed a single feature being produced, and I guess one of the things I've experienced from processing other, I guess, A-SPEC and D-SPEC data is repeatability with attributes. Things like road names, for example. You've got 20 lamp poles on a street. You certainly don't want to write that street name 20 times. Does your solution allow for repeatability where it may remember, say, the last attribute introduced, and it auto populates that unless otherwise changed?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I think it definitely comes up a lot exactly in the situations you're outlining. So there's kind of two ways we handle that in the AC/DC system. The things that kind of apply to a whole subdivision, like you might have the construction company, we use a common block to apply those across all assets. Where it's something where it's particular to a feature, what we do allow is you can copy the same block across and use the same bits you need to change. So you can use copy across. There's also the ability to use @in to quickly use just via text edit really fast, do string replace. So there's actually, so that's the 3 ways within the system we currently handle that.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Joe. Are there any more questions that people might like to ask?
Okay, let's,
Over to you, Jordan.
shall we move on? Great. Okay, so here it is. Here's the wrap up. We're down to the wire now. So Gabby spoke about training. The next A-SPEC and QGIS courses are on 3rd and 4th of November. Feel free to contact any of us about that. We will provide an updated code list by the end of October 2020 and then look at how we're going to maintain that. The API code list release will be November 2020. Next releases of the updates. Now that we've had all of our forums, we can see that there are going to be some minor changes to attributes and the like. So we're now proposing that we will have the next release of updates in January 2021. So I'll talk about what we're going to do around that in just a moment. Certification process, haven't talked about that today, but it's something that we covered off on all of our forums, and we will be covering it off. There's more APIs planned for 2021. So we're looking at putting all of the other specs into APIs so they can be ingested through web services. Now, we will provide you, just going back for a moment in terms of the release of the updates, we will provide you a summary of all the proposed changes agreed to during the forums by the end of November, with a recommendation of when they will be implemented. And as I said, at this stage, it's looking like January 2021. Minor changes will be communicated to you via email. Major changes will be looking to create a webinar for people to attend. This will be recorded and then we'll make it available upon request. But due to the nature of the IP, this will not be open to the public. However, we anticipate that all consultants will have login access that they can then download it. So with that, I want to acknowledge all of our presenters, and again, thank you, Lara. I know that it's we've got a bit of a time difference. I think it's something like 14 hours with where you are, so really appreciate you making this time available to us. And you really set the scene. Yeah, you're very welcome. And you've really set the scene. And to our other presenters, Andre, Brett, Neil, Ken, Belinda, Terry, Chris, and Gabby, and Janosch, what was really evident was a strong focus on data quality, accuracy, completion, and certainty. Thank you very much for everybody's attendance. I really appreciate you coming on today and also participating in the other forums that we ran. We'll be around for a little bit longer. If you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to ask them, but we'd like you to complete the feedback form before you head off, and I'll put that onto the screen. And yes, getting data into the cloud could be a bit of fun. Thanks, everyone.